Hello class. If you can't remember from our Illuminate sessions who I am, my name is Jason Kelly. I serve here in the state of Georgia as an associate pastor of student education. I have been a full-time minister for a little over 15 years. For the first part of my career, my wife was in the military and we moved just about every 2 years. So I have been before many different search committees, some good and some that, well, bless their heart, had no earthly clue what they were doing. Some had some good elements, and some elements probably needed a little bit more thought. For instance, a church I recently went through the process with was almost comical. They did many things well. For instance, they had a clear sense of their purpose and a fairly good idea of what they were looking for. It was not a one-way experience either. They understood that it was a two-way process. They were looking for the right person, but they wisely understood that I was also looking for the right church. The big problem was the makeup of the committee. No one that I would serve with as education minister was on that committee. The people who had the most at stake in this process and the people that I would have to work the closest with were not on the committee. That meant that the process was going to be dragged out much longer than it should have been, because I would not accept the position until I had met and got to know those people. In that case, I could not disagree more with Welch's charter for the Personnel Committee on 101 of our textbook. No one committee fits all mentality will work here, folks, nor are you going to want it to. The committee needs to fit the personnel that is being recruited. Now, a little bit more on that later. So your church wants to find someone who is going to fit into your congregation like a piece in a puzzle. How should you go about it? I wish I could say that everything in this report is from my own profound wisdom and thoughts, but several sources were consulted, and at the end of this video I will give them to you, and I suggest you look over them, peruse them a little bit, because if you're not now, you may one day be involved in a search. After reading many different sources and how they did their committees, I quickly realized that many have made this way too difficult, and some did not think it out enough. We are going to look at 6 components of an effective search committee made up from several different sources, including our text. And I will give you these sources at the end, and I encourage you to glean some wisdom from them. The first is prayer. You know, it amazed me that of the 23 sites I visited and the 4 books that I looked at, only 3 started the process with prayer. I hope they meant that it was supposed to be done and that it was a given and they just didn't put it down. I like the advice given on the Canadian Christian Missionary Alliance website. They suggested that the whole process start with a congregational meeting to saturate the process in prayer. They also suggest that the congregation as a whole be involved in helping to define what the church is looking for in a candidate. At the same meeting, they allow a suggestion to be written down and turned in. The results of such are given to the search committee. Everything we do should begin in prayer, and finding the right spiritual leaders definitely should begin with prayer. Second is the composition of the committee, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't very passionate about this, because I've seen it done very poorly. The composition of the committee is extremely important. It should not only represent the larger church body, but also some of the people who will be working closely with the candidate chosen. For instance, if the committee will be looking for an education minister, the committee ought to be comprised of some Sunday school teachers. If it is a youth pastor you're looking for, perhaps some of the volunteers that currently work within that ministry. The reasons for this are many. For instance, no one knows how to better define what you should be looking for than the people who know the needs of that ministry best. Also, as I said, this is a two-way process, and an intelligent candidate is going to want to ask questions that few are in a better position to answer than those who work in that ministry. No one also has more of a stake in getting this right than those people who currently work in that ministry. I imagine this is not perhaps so much the case when searching for a senior pastor. So there are several things, though, that are constant that should be kept in mind when selecting the composition of your committee. The first is, you should have at least one representative of your church staff. PastorSearchCommittee.com suggests that this does not have to be your senior pastor if during the process you allow time for the senior pastor and the candidate to meet and talk. Remember, if they can't get along now, it's not likely to improve. In the same manner, an associate pastor should either be on the committee or time set aside for interaction if you're looking for a senior pastor. It seems like common sense, but a lot of churches don't do it. Second, if an associate pastor is what you're looking for, or an office administration position, there should be a representative on the committee that is a part of the ministry in question. For instance, if you're searching for a youth pastor, make sure you have a youth volunteer on the committee, or even a youth with voting privileges. Remember, he or she will be their pastor. If you're looking for a children's ministry, maybe somebody within the children's ministry, one of your volunteers. Third, perhaps a deacon or an elder or a member of your church council would be wise. This is what the Center for Baptist Studies suggests. 4, beyond those, the rest can be members of the congregation at large. It should be noted that the Center for Baptist Studies at Mercer University has a good write-up on the composition of a search committee, and it contains good insight. Third, call it bylaws, governing guidelines, whatever you want to call it, but the first thing your committee needs to do, and before you advertise the position, and long before you see your first candidate, the committee needs to come up with some simple bylaws that will govern everything from how they will conduct their meetings to what it will take to pursue a candidate. For instance, 1, what vote will it take to pursue a candidate? Walter P. Sheridan writes a good book about personnel search committees. He states that a unanimous vote is unreasonable to expect, but I can tell you from being on the other side that I would not want to go anywhere where there was not a unanimous decision on the search committee. But whatever percentage of the vote you decide upon, this should be done beforehand. Job, salary, descriptions, and all of that kind of stuff should also be determined beforehand. Don't say it's negotiable. The Center for Baptist Studies states the obvious that this is a large determining factor, and it should not be a secret. Don't go through the whole process only to find out that your candidate can't accept the position for what you're able to offer. They should know their needs, but you should also know what you're able to offer. Having a clearly defined job description will give your candidate a good upfront idea of what will be expected of him or her. The committee should hear from people within the church, either through an open format like we spoke of before, or specific interviews, what is actually needed. Do not go to a third party and get an impersonal write-up for a job description. Make it personal. Take the time. The committee must define who they are looking for. What person will best fit our needs? For instance, every church wants a strong youth ministry, but few are willing to do what it takes to have one. So perhaps you're really looking for a program director and not a youth pastor. And folks, there's a big difference between a pastor and a director. There are many sources to help with this, and I recently found out that Lifeway Bookstores has forms, checklists that can help you narrow down this. Last, a committee should divvy out responsibilities. Someone such as someone who will help compose information and statistics on the church. An intelligent candidate will want this information. Someone should also be in charge of travel arrangements, etc. The Reformed Seminary of Atlanta has a good website that contains a checklist for such. The next part that you should have involved in your search committee is advertisement. Your committee should come up with, based around your job description and your funds available for advertising, a job advertisement and how you will actually advertise it. You will need to come up with guidelines for such. For instance, does this person have to be a Southern Baptist? If so, give your job description to your area director of missions, or DOM, and post it on sbc.net, or check within your denomination and its leadership for how you should go about doing it. If not, and this is not important for you, the sky's the limit. Websites such as youthspecialties.com, churchstaffing.com, ministrysearch.com, and others allow you to post your advertisements and receive candidate inquiries. This is how the vast majority find positions. Also, decide if you want only resumes, video resumes, or audio-visual media that contains sermons or an idea of what kind of ministry they've done before. Folks, I can't stress enough, utilize all the technologies that are available, and don't let your ignorance on a particular type of technology handicap your church. If you can't find it, find someone who can. Next, the actual selection process. Your committee will have to come up with how you will weed through your candidate resumes, a method for comparing individuals to your well-defined job description. You will, inevitably, receive tons of resumes, and this will become important. Don't sell yourself short because of your salary that you're posting. Stay true to what you're looking for. It would be wise to have researched salary. Both PastorSearchCommittee.com and ChurchStaffing.com have statistics based on the state you live in and the average budget of your church for the last 5 years. If your salary is far below the average, perhaps you need to look for a part-time or bivocational minister. SBC.net has good information for determining such. Also, how will you progress through the process? Once you have narrowed your candidates down to a manageable size, will you begin first with phone interviews? And will everyone be present, or will you divvy out resumes for each member to be responsible for a portion? Will you then invite your final 3 for a site visit? Nearly every source I've looked at is in agreement that in the final stage, you need to have a face-to-face meeting, no matter where the candidate is coming from. Last, how will the final candidate be presented before the church? Once a candidate is picked, how will you proceed? Some of this may need to be constitutionally correct for your church. What responsibilities will the committee have after the candidate is picked? Most sources I've looked at agree that the committee members are now the people the candidate knows the best and have a responsibility to continue to support and encourage the candidate. In short, your job is not done when you give your vote. As I said before, this video will end with a list of sources I have used and recommend for your use. I'd like to end with a little bit of humor too, and you will find this as a Word document, and I encourage you to look at it. Take care. God bless.